brought him in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 49 of The Raw Men. Today we are talking to Jim Helton. Now, he is the Kentucky State Director of American Atheists. He was also the president of Tri-State Freethinkers, and he is the one who organized the protest of the Noah's Ark Park. And we wanted to go into some details about not only how that was all put together, but some of how that changed the story and how it continues to today. Jim, how do you do, sir? Good morning.
Thanks for having me on.
So when you fill me in, like right at the beginning of this, like how do you find out that this was going on?
So from the start, last year, we decided as an organization, we want to do a billboard campaign. And, you know, one of the things our group does is equal rights and separation of church and state. So our original billboard idea was the main obstacle to equality is religion. That's what we were going to put up. But then marriage equality happened and we were like, wonderful. So maybe, you know, what message were we going to look for? And one of our members said, hey, what about the Ark Encounter? And we started to look into it and we were horrified what we found. So we decided to do a billboard campaign against the Ark Encounter. And we took a playbook right out of David Silverman's book. How do we grab people's attention? So we came up with Genocide and Incest Park. You know, no billboard company would do it. They agreed to it, but once it hit the press, the amount of press we got was unbelievable. It actually made international attention saying we were going to put up this billboard. We raised 10 grand in about 3 days. They all backed out. We got more press when we said, hey, nobody will put this up. So we got another round of press. We then turned it into, let's look at doing a protest. It took us a little while to put together because logistically it was a nightmare. But what we wanted to do was draw attention to the Ark and its story. You know, the toughest question to ask is, why did you take on this project? What's your number one reason? There isn't a number one reason. There's so many reasons. The first one is, though, it's anti-science. You know, as you know, they're claiming the Earth is 6,000 years old. They're saying evolution isn't true. Even if you take it from a moral of the story, it's a story about mass genocide and repopulating the Earth through incest for the second time. Then they won't hire LGBT. If you're single, they make you sign a paper saying you won't have sex if you're single. Utterly ridiculous, all while receiving up to $18 million in tax incentives, not counting the 100 acres the Grant County gave them, or the 100,000 in cash, or the 62 million in junk bonds, or the TIF. The list goes on of why we took on this project.
You know, when you mentioned the $18 million, well, I made a blog post about this where I brought up that, you know, that this was bringing in $18 million worth of tax incentives. And I was accused by one of the supporters of the Ark of that being a lie and that I was spreading a lie. And I don't know, how can when I crack open a newspaper and that's what it says, how is that a lie?
Because here's what Ken Hammond's saying, and you have to look at his words carefully. What he says is the actual boat was built with private funds only. There was no money, public money given. That is the line he's toting. And it's sort of true, meaning the land was donated, part of it. He was giving cash for the land, but the actual boat was done by junk bonds and private donations. That's correct. But our point is, I don't care if you get 18 million up front or in arrears, you're still getting the money. And that's the technicality he's preaching.
So it's still $18 million in tax incentives or tax breaks, just like I said. So it's not a lie at all.
No, not at all. He just hasn't received it yet. And so his followers are saying, no, we built it without it. We don't have it.
The statement that I made in my blog post was that it was a waste of $18 million, that it wasn't, and that it wasn't deserved because it fails all three prongs of the lemon test, which is probably a good thing that we discuss. What is the lemon test? You know, the first Lemon versus Kurtzman, I think in 1970, the first question that they had, this establishes how to tell if legislation is a violation of the First Amendment, whether it's a violation of the Establishment Clause specifically. Is it an endorsement of religion or an entanglement of religion? The first question being is, does it have a secular purpose? And of course, that's why I asked Eric Hovind and his little cronies there, what is the secular purpose? And that asshole said the secular purpose is science. We know it's complete bullshit because there's no experimentation, there's no kind of peer review, there's no practice of any aspect of the scientific method. You know, there's no there's no evidentiary basis for any of the claims. Nothing. There's nothing remotely like science going on anywhere near that place. First off, and then the second question for the lemon class is does it have the effect of endorsing or inhibiting any particular religion? Which, of course, Ken Ham says that the only reason the art park exists is to promote religion. He says that it's its only purpose. Yeah. So obviously, any tax incentives that we give are going to be considered an endorsement of a promotion of a particular religion, clearly. And then the third question about this is, does it involve a excessive entanglement of government with religion? And I would consider $18 million pretty fucking excessive.
Yeah. Well, let's look at how they pulled this off. And I want to look at it from 2 points of view. One, from a separation church point of view, and from a fiscally point of view. So what they did is, the actual boat is a nonprofit. So nonprofits can discriminate whether we like it or not, but they can't receive state tax and money incentives. The entrance gate that you pay to get in is a for-profit company that can receive tax incentives. So that's what they did. The main attraction is nonprofit, but the entrance gate and everything around it, which is nothing, is the for-profit company. So that's how they did this. Originally, our Kentucky's governor said, hey, he became aware that there were separation church state issues, that they were discriminating, said, we'll still give you the money, but you have to promise us you won't discriminate, and we'll give you the money. Ken Ham sued the state of Kentucky for discriminating against him, for not allowing him to discriminate. We had a new governor who then replaced the transportation cabinet that opposed Ken Ham overnight with nobody looking. A judge says, we're okay with it. The governor said, we're fine with the decision, didn't appeal it, and then had to write a $190,000 check to AIG's attorneys. So that was and any other judge, any other governor, any other state, we're not, like you said, the lump test, this is clearly a violation. But I wanted to take a different angle from people, even if we lose that argument because people just don't listen. I want to appeal to the fiscal conservatives out there. Why do we give $18 million in tax incentives? It's to say, I want you to build your crap here. Don't build it in Texas. Don't build it in Tennessee. Come to Kentucky. We try to lure business here. He built this $100 million boat without any of that. He was denied. It's only a month or two away from being completed, and we're giving him $18 million for free. The boat can't go anywhere. It's landlocked. It doesn't float. There was no financial reason for the state to give it to him. He was already here. You could make the argument 2 years ago when he started the project. You can't make it now. It just makes no financial sense to do it.
Now, as I understand, the judge that ruled on this used as his excuse, said that entertainment centers or something along those, like amusement parks, even those that promote religion, would be qualified for the neutrality required to get. But there's no neutrality here. This is an amusement park. I mean, and Ken Ham even got on the news to say as much. He said, this is not an entertainment center where people go to have fun. There is only one purpose, and that is to promote religion, and that's it. So obviously he said that after the ruling, but he's defying, he's actually defying the judge there. And then when they have their grand opening, this was a disturbing thing for me. I mean, they have one of the state governors and like the mayor, and then the high school marching band all on the ark. Yeah. So here's what they did. They had the band go, but they said to avoid separation church and state issues, the band didn't actually go into the ark, to the actual boat, because remember, it's a for-profit on the entrance gate, but they didn't go into the boat. But the school gave them all free passes to come back. Mm-hmm. It's like, are you kidding me? And then he appealed to various schools to have field trips. Yes. To the ark. So once FFRF sent out 1,300 letters to surrounding schools to say this is a violation, you can't do this, Ken Ham immediately came out on his blog and says, public school teachers are free and students are only $1. Then we had our great educator of Kentucky came out and said this. You think he would clarify for people? And he said, we will not let outside groups tell us where we can't take our kids. And then he followed it up with, but any field trip must be towards educational purposes, yada, yada, yada. So he backtracked slightly, but in Kentucky, people are going to consider that educational purposes. But you can't go you can't have a teacher-directed field trip to Noah's Ark and have that on any kind of excuse of education. And if I get wind that there was a field trip to the Ark directed by teachers or it led by the capacity of the school in any way, then I will be visiting that.
Yeah, I am a gambling man. And so I will bet you right now that there will be public schools that go to that Ark. I can guarantee it almost. They're going to do it.
The first one I hear about, there's going to be a response.
So here was one of the after effects of the protest. People in Grant County, my email box filled with violations of what the public schools were doing. And these are to the absurd, to just things that are going to piss you off. So here, let me just give you a couple of the highlights. One, a student brought a book about Charles Darwin to school. The teachers confiscated the book and said it was not appropriate for school.
The book about Charles Darwin?
Yes.
Is there any kind of explanation what type of book about Charles Darwin? I mean, is it?
It was just a book about Charles Darwin, who he was. Now, let me give you a better one than that. In chemistry high school class, part of their assignments were to do a report on Sodom and Gomorrah in chemistry class. Yeah, silence is all it's.
What are you supposed to do? Blow up a village?
I was trying to figure out, people are like, what's the connection? I'm like, I'm baffled. Unless you're trying to figure out the chemical reaction, how people turn to salt. Maybe they figured that out.
Okay, Sally, you want to volunteer?
There's been stand-ups in the office that say, I'm a good leader because I'm a leader through Christ. And when it was brought to the superintendent's attention, they go, oh, no, it's okay because there's 30 of them throughout the district. Like, that makes it okay. We have city attorneys saying on letters and writing from them saying, oh, we're not going to do anything about it because you're only one person and we're not changing it for one person. We have writing in schools from school newsletters stating that they're doing fundraisers for churches who are going to Guatemala to proselytize the word of Jesus. And these are fundraisers being done through the public schools. On the Grant County website, they have a person there. His title is pastor of the high school. They have their own high school pastor on the website. That's his only job title. So we are going to have a field day with this, but it was either parents who were afraid to speak out now that we did this protest. They're like, oh, somebody can support me, or parents who have spoke out, but they were ignored by the administration. And we have a mountain of evidence in writing that we're going to address. And the violations, there's just too many to mention. There are a ton.
Now, are you really going to address these? I mean, are we talking about, and maybe, wink and nudge or what if you need to, but, is there going to be litigation over this?
Absolutely. What we are going through all of them and kind of grouping them together of which schools, which districts. Even the library put cross stickers. Public library put cross stickers on the majority of their books. Like, there's so many, and some of them, we need to look at the main ones. The ones that hold a lot of weight that we have in writing versus the hearsay ones. We're going to spend the next month of putting all these together. We're going to send out a letter to the superintendents, to the attorneys, and it's not like a normal letter, which I think will just state, hey, you got to stop doing this. The violations are so bad. They're by so many people, and they're across the board by everybody. We're going to demand training by all the staff on the separation of church and state. And when they refuse us, we've already talked to FFRF. We will sue them. And we have parents now who have standing, willing to take on that suit. So this will not go away.
I'm glad to hear that, and I don't know how I can support that effort, but I want to be part of it. I want to endorse what you're doing, and I was outraged when I saw something else that Eric Hovind was working on. Apparently, they're doing a creation movie in 3D on top of that arc, and in there you have Ken Hammond making statements that we can prove are not true. And we have in that video, they're making science claims that we can prove are not true, like that for example, they're trying to be educational, trying to create a movie to spread to kids that is saying things like that there's no way to add genetic information and thus that disproves evolution. But we do have exactly that in bushels, and it's too easily demonstrable. You know, they don't ever use the definition of what the hell evidence means. When it is convenient for them, they'll take deletions and other other reduction type mutations, and they'll say, well, that's a reduction of information, but they don't consider that the additions and duplications are an increase by the same scale. So they just change their metrics as need be, so that they have a double standard in their favor.
Yeah, the mental gymnastics they have to do, like they start with a conclusion and they're going to do everything to prove it right and ignore anything that proves it wrong.
Yeah, I just saw an interview with a molecular geneticist employed by Answers in Genesis who's now working on the Ark. What the hell molecular genetics is she going to do on those 40 stuffed animals? But she's there to tell people that molecular genetics backs up what the Bible says, like hell it does. And we know that. So these people are making bald-faced lies to children in the guise of education, deliberately deceiving them. There has to be a recourse for that.
Yeah, it's flat out lies. Like Bill Nye said, we're raising scientifically literate children, and that is dangerous. There are consequences to that action. You and I had the pleasure of touring the Ark with Bill Nye and seeing him there. You know, and Ken Hammond's like, hey, Bill, can we be friends? And Bill's like, I don't think so, Ken. You know, he said, if you were drowning in the ocean, I'd probably save you, but that's about it. You know?
So in that movie that I was just talking about, Ken Ham says of Bill Nye that Bill Nye refuses to admit that he has a blind faith because he can't explain where matter comes from. It doesn't matter that Bill Nye actually can explain where matter comes from. That he says he doesn't know where life comes from. Doesn't matter, again, that we have all of these elements of abiogenesis that we now do understand and can actually argue that point. These are just lies. And that irritates me when people in a position of assumed authority bypass the scientific process, they bypass peer review, they bypass all the requirements of education, and then just use the smoke and mirrors of emotive cinema to reach the kids directly, to tell them that the science community is lying and that they're and to be liars themselves in that attempt.
Yeah, and this is what I think is the root of our problem. They're basing decisions on belief and not science. And when you look at that, it's not only the Ark, but we're arguing over women's health care and abortion. We're arguing over where transgender people can pee. We're arguing over dying with dignity. All of our social issues, it's because our representatives are basing them on belief and not science. Because these people are telling people science is lying to you, it's wrong, you can't trust it. And that is why we get so upset at these things. It's not just a boat and we're protesting or arguing that it's a boat. What harm is it doing? It's doing a ton of harm.
And people don't understand that religion and faith really do either impede or retard or reverse progress in every application it ever touches, just like you just set up.
Yeah,
we can't seriously, or we can't intellectually consider the pros and cons of any given situation because we have to have this blind belief that prompts a negative thinking, a backward perspective on everything.
If you take away religion, we're not having any of these arguments. Kentucky tried to pass a bill. This is just how anti-science Kentucky is. We try to pass a sex ed bill, and this is all it said. Sex education must be medically and scientifically accurate. That's all. It failed. There's only 13 states that require that in the country, that sex ed be medically and scientifically accurate, because we're basing our laws on belief and not science.
Well, here in Texas, we have one of the highest rates of teen pregnancy because for the longest time we were doing abstinence only. And of course, I say this all the time. I bring up the statistics that Texas has the highest rate of repeat teen pregnancy, which is not a huge surprise when you're teaching abstinence only.
Yeah, and this, how do we get on sex ed from the Ark? Because again, this is the same people, same belief system. These are the things it leads to in our society, and it's a huge problem. I will say, though, as the results of all this, like, when people are asking what are the results of our protests, what have we accomplished? One, I told you about the violations we're getting in. So now we can stand up for people who are afraid to speak out and do that. But in addition to, we changed the story, and I can't take credit for the initial work on the Ark. Dan Arrell, yourself, Ed Hensley, Seth Andrews, lots of people wrote articles and brought to light and discovered all the things the Ark were doing. But I think our contribution is to pull it all together. we changed the story. A lot of the articles were fluff pieces about the Ark. They're building this $100 million boat. Now, not so much. We had 6 documentary film crews there on site, including Bill Nye's team. We had every press you can imagine. Fox and Friends was airing us live. So, even though they don't agree with our message, they were airing us live. Our points got across. If you look at the New York Times article, it's Noah's Ark in Kentucky, dinosaurs included. Noah's Ark attraction visits protesters, all and on. Like, who pays for the Ark? Taxpayers help. That we actually changed the story. GQ magazine emailed me and said, we're doing a story on the Ark, and we can't search the Ark without your name and your organization coming up. Like I said, I can't take credit for the research, but we put a marketing campaign from the beginning to permanently attach this to it. I heard somebody blamed us for the low attendance in the Ark. I don't know if that's true, but I'll take credit for it. That's amazing if so. Because as you saw, there wasn't that many people in there.
Yeah, I think that was just like projecting blame, perhaps, because for it being opening day, the first afternoon, like by noon of the opening day, and there's nobody in the parking lot and nobody at the stalls. I think they had a few people in the morning. They had, I think, an estimated 4,000 people, which was, what was that, a third of what they were expecting for the first day?
Yeah,
something about that. So yeah, they're just projecting it on you. We certainly didn't stop anybody coming off that off ramp, and change people's minds that way. I don't think so. I mean, the only thing that I felt really, really good about standing there holding my sign was there was a van full of kids, and that's a church school, right? And there's all these children, and I was happy to hold that sign that says "This never happened," and to know that all of these children are staring at my sign. It's like, at least I am part of that message, to this van load of children.
Yeah, and people ask, like, we expected the off ramp to be backed up. It never got more than 3 or 4 cars deep. We knew creationists were going to go, but the whole point of, you can put up a billboard somewhere, you can write an article somewhere, but all the press gravitated to this story, and it went beyond what a little billboard could do. To, we wanted the average parent to say, "Oh, this looks neat. 2 of every animal. Let's go." But to get those people to think, wait a minute, this is anti-science. They're telling my kids science isn't true. They're telling my kids it's okay to discriminate. And those are the people we were trying to appeal to, that thought it might be interesting to go look at. And I think we successfully, through the media, not physically, but through the media and education, we turned a lot of those parents away.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting confrontation with some of those people. They're not people that I ever talked to directly. Mm-hmm. And it was a little, you like to remember that the one guy in the video that's holding the sign up over his head, that poor bastard. I mean, he's like, I don't want to say he was completely out of his mind, but he doesn't, there's no information in his head that is correct. He doesn't understand anything correctly, and everything he knows is wrong. So, I mean, it's worse than just being ignorant, is knowing things that actually aren't true. And trying to beat down that wall of ignorance and objection that he's been conditioned to have. He can't discuss any of this and even try to understand it. Another thing I noticed with people like that is they don't have the ability to think hypothetically, okay, well, if your position is true, then they can't even imagine that part. And I think this is because the whole belief system is all about pretend. So it's all about, making yourself believe, which of course means that you can't think objectively like that.
Beyond Eric Hovind and the crazy people, what I was surprised at, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, is Answers in Genesis sent quite a few employees to the site that were there the entire day. It wasn't, and they were walking around. Did you get a chance to talk to any of them? And what were your thoughts on that?
I didn't talk to anybody that I could recognize as being connected to Answers in Genesis. Everybody that I talked to, I thought was probably news media.
Yeah, they actually had their lanyards on that said Answers in Genesis. That's how the only reason I knew. And I know you didn't talk to maybe say Tony, but our tour guide at the Ark Encounter. I thought when we're behind the belly of the beast, we're talking to them guys, and the guy walks in and says, "Aaron Ra, I love your videos." This is an employee of Answers in Genesis. I about fell out of my chair. He's like, "Can I get a picture?" And I jumped up and like, "I'll take it." Like, that to me was just
that was
amazing.
That was a bit of a surprise where he said that, he said to me that I keep his staff on their toes.
And you wonder when he's on his toes, when eventually he's just going to give up and fall over and say, I'm waiting for that day. I think that will be an amazing thing when he reaches out.
Tony was, our guide on the Ark. That I had a few interesting conversations with him. You had already, you were following Bill Nye, and I allowed myself to get sidetracked. I'm sorry to say, but I explained. I talked to Tony about the Pakicetus, because on the Ark they actually have a Pakicetus, which is, in my opinion, the best rendering of that animal that's ever been done. It's so sad that it's on the Noah's Ark. But it is extraordinary, and I'm explaining to him what this is. That this is the ancestor of all whales. Why would you put that on Noah's Ark? And then we went around and showed Mesohippus. Why would you put this? Well, this is the beginning of the horse kind. Well, it's not, because there's Hyracotherium before this. So you have where this with the Mesohippus, like the 3-toed horse. Well, there was a 5-toed horse before this one. And so why would you? And then we showed him the Calicothere, and went to the same thing about that. And then we went to they had a pair of dromaeosaurs, and I had to point out that all dromaeosaurs had feathers. And so he's contesting whether dromaeosaurs has feathers, and we got all this proof that they have feathers. And of course, what does that do to your belief that dinosaurs have no relation to birds if they're visibly indistinguishable from birds? And then he'd already explained that he accepts speciation from changes within a kind, he said. So he says multiple species can develop from a single kind. Well, I had to show him that there's no way that you can identify what a kind is. And now every example or every exhibit of those 40 animals that are supposed to be on that boat, they are all representatives of creative kinds. But as we've just seen, the horse that they had is not a representative of that kind, because they're missing its own ancestors. And if you wanted to use the whale kind, fine, but why would you put a whale? It's an ark, right? Whales have an excuse for why they're not on that boat, right? I mean, you wouldn't need to do that. And then I pointed out the difference between microevolution and macroevolution, because he made that argument. But if you accept speciation, that is macroevolution by definition. So how can you say that you accept species developing within kinds, but you don't accept macroevolution? You have to change the definitions. What do you have to do?
I think it was interesting. We had a unique opportunity because we both got tours, we got separated, but we took two totally different approaches. You went at him from the science, and when I was going with him, I was going at from the morality point of view. But normally when you're at the Creation Museum or Ark Museum, you can't wear offensive, shirts or something that says science on it, or you can't talk about the exhibits. They'll ask you to leave. Here we had a tour guide. You're having full-blown scientific debates, which is drawing a crowd. He's showing me the exhibits, and I'm like, I don't get it. That's immoral to me. How could that possibly be a good thing? And we're drawing crowds, and people are hearing that. And that, to me, was amazing.
Yeah, I got into it with one guy when we were standing just a few feet away from Ken Hammond and Bill Nye as they were arguing. Somebody said that, with a very hick accent, he said, "This is a slap in the face for them evolutionists, because they can't explain any of this." And I just couldn't. Sorry, I know there's bait and a hook there, but I'm going to bite. and I turned around, of course, this is not a slap in it's a slap in the face of the integrity of science, and then jump all into that to have that conversation. And so once he figured out that I knew what I was talking about, he didn't want to have a conversation anymore.
Yeah,
because he wants to hold on to his little notion that we somehow can explain it. Yeah, I can. Not a problem. Got it all.
Yeah, I liked the other part I liked is when we were in the children's part where they had the books, and to the left had the sign, if you can disprove the flood, you can disprove heaven and hell. And you and I were there, and the creationists were next to us, and almost simultaneous, we all nod our head and said, "Yep."
I took a picture with that. So I got a short bit of video with that plaque there, and there was, of course, a Christian lady with all her kids, and she's telling their kids how it's all true and they can believe it. And then right in front of them, I record the video where I say, you guys are lowering your standards, and my standards are higher than this, and if you're going to make it this easy, then my job's already done.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different ways to disprove the flood. I mean, it's the most preposterous story in the entire compilation. I mean, the guy living 3 days inside of a fish, the fact that the snake talks, the talking donkey with the flaming sword, all of that stuff is less absurd than Noah's Ark is. And so that's why they built that stupid thing, because they wanted the most ridiculous story in the entire book to seem plausible somehow.
Yeah, my other favorite thing, I'm going to try to share this with you just real quick, if you can.
If I can.
I'm just going to see if you can you see my screen?
Yes, yeah. for a moment I did.
Yeah. So this is my favorite shot and everyone died except the 8 people in the ark. Like, we made this claim that it was genocide and incest, and it's like, here they are just saying, yep. I submitted this picture to the Louisville Magazine. I think it might make it in a few of the press clippings. I started sending it out, with that.
Yeah,
so
very good, very good. It's a very frustrating thing to me, just when you make a statement that isn't verifiably correct. And I'll say how far this goes. If you make an assertion that you can't show to be true, then you don't get to say that it is true. If you can't show that it's true, you can say, well, maybe, if you can show that maybe it is true, you can say maybe it is true. But if you can't even show that maybe, you don't get to say it. And, this is the problem with faith, is that faith just asserts absolute nonsense for no reason and then refuses to admit when they're wrong. Which Answers in Genesis has made their statement of faith that they will automatically and thoughtlessly reject any and all evidence there could ever be if it contradicts their interpretation of Bronze Age folklore. And it actually says that, specifically, that no amount of science, of any kind, can be valid if it contradicts the Bible. So
that tells you everything you need to know right there.
And this is what Ken Ham advocates: is his God glasses. The God glasses is a code name for confirmation bias, where he says that he's seen the evidence of brain cancer in dinosaurs, for example, going back 70 million years. But he says, but the Bible says that God created everything and it was good. So that can't exist. So he dismisses what we can prove based on a fable that we can prove false, because he wants to believe in the fable. And the excuse he gives for that is that if you want to believe in salvation in the back of the book, then you've got to believe in creation in the front of the book, because how are the kids going to believe you when you talk about message of Jesus in the same storybook? So you have to make believe the whole mess. Yeah, so there's no truth to any of it, but there's a hell of a lot of lies.
That's the one thing I agree with Ken Ham on, and I can't believe I said that. But he basically, the reason he holds on to Genesis so much, because it's the foundation of the Bible. And if you can disprove Genesis, then the rest of the Bible falls apart. And I agree. We've disproven Genesis, and the rest of the Bible falls apart. So that's why he so adamantly hangs on to the creation story, where some Christians don't understand. Like, why does, who cares? And that's why he cares, so much about that.
I've talked to a lot of other Christians who just don't have a problem with any of the details. And yeah, you're right. If you really examine it, you've kind of got to be a literalist, or you just got to make up excuses, or ignore certain things, And I've talked to Christians who say that this part of the Bible, this was all fables and everything. Well, then where does the whole sacrifice of Jesus become necessary? And under no interpretation can I ever see that it was ever necessary. But in order for that, you have to have the original sin thing, which at least in most people's interpretation.
Yeah.
So you've got to have this. And why would anyone want to believe any of this nonsense?
I don't know. The question I get asked is science and religion compatible? And I'm like, no. And people, there are Christians that say yes, but those are the ones that are ignoring the Bible, that don't know their faith. And I'm like, well, I appreciate you being pro-science, and I appreciate you ignoring the majority of the Bible, but why do you still hang on to, these pieces? No, it makes no sense.
You said, or when we were up there for the protest, I had the impression that there was another wave of events that was going to take place after that. Have you already explained all of that?
Yeah, through some. We actually adopted the highway in front of the Ark Encounter. So this weekend we will be cleaning the highway in front of the Ark Encounter. We're looking at, people have asked when the next protest is. We'll probably wait for the next big announcement for them. Like, are they going to open up a new section? Is there going to be, if there's another major event, we will probably do another protest around that major event. In addition to, we are working with the scientific community and researching the laws in Kentucky to propose better science-based legislation. We are looking to change the law in Kentucky because I think a couple things need to happen. Scientists are afraid to speak out in Kentucky. And around the country somewhat. Some will, and we applaud those, but Ken Hammond tries to get them fired. He attacks them. So teachers and biologists are afraid to speak out. So we have to make sure the administrations will protect these scientists and have their back when they speak out. Because there are museums here in Cincinnati that if the evolutionary says the Ark Encounter is not true, it's bad science, they'll get fired. And that's unacceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm at a loss at how somebody like Ken Ham even gets away with any of the crap that he does, much less how he manages to get $100 million to build this eyesore.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The reason he has so much power is because he's so well funded. You know, the power of money and corruption and the people that believe this, the amount of money they can sink into it is a lot. And politicians want that money. You know, even our own local museum, Answers in Genesis, had donors donate to both the Creation Museum and our Real History Museum with saying, if you speak out, we'll stop donations. And because, you know, museums are hurting, they bought their silence, basically. It's a huge problem, but he has it because he has money and people are gullible. And frankly, in Kentucky, why is he here? Because our education system is not the best. He can take advantage of people's ignorance. And that's exactly what he's doing. He is a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, I'm incensed at this, and I want to bring up recent news for anyone that didn't catch. You, of course, are regional director for American Atheists for Kentucky. I'm regional director of American Atheists for Texas. You are also president of Texas of the Tri-State Freethinkers, and I've just last night been elected president of Atheist Alliance of America.
And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you very much. And of course, we have this interest in building. The Atheist Alliance of America has an interest in building a more pro-secular society, promoting education, actual factual science, secular science education, and a better competency. And so things like this, religion just retards all possible progress in that direction and wants to hold us all back. And this is a very frustrating thing for me when, as I said, people are making assertions that clearly cannot be supported, and they're stating things that we can prove are not true for the specific purpose of misleading and deceiving children who would then be undermined in their science education and would never pursue a career in science, because what point is there?
Yeah. And we are looking to partner with some scientists and do some after school science programs. We're at the early stages of that. But one of the other side effects of the protest is now I've been getting requests to speak around the tri-state area, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, about what we did. And then in doing so, we're starting to unite a lot of the free thought groups, atheist groups that were just off doing their own thing to say, if we unite together, we are much stronger. We can affect schools. We can affect state legislation. We can affect school board meetings. And so we're starting to try to pull that alliance together. And I think that's very, very important for our community if we're going to make a change and make a difference.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this story? Because I'm
yeah, there's one more. We went to get a porta potty and we contacted Gotta Go Rentals, who told us they had plenty available, gave us the price. I'm ordering it. They asked for the address, go to the protest. I said, it's at the site. They asked what for. I said, protest. They asked what we were protesting. I said, the Ark Encounter. They're like, please hold. Came back. I'm sorry, we're sold out. We have none available. They would not rent to us because we were protesting the Ark Encounter. So we went to a national company and we booked a deal with them, told them we need it delivered between 9 and 10. They said, no problem. At 9:13 a.m., we weren't aware of is they subcontracted to 5 Star, which was a local company, who then said, are you the Tri-State Freethinkers? Yes. Are you protesting the Ark Encounter? Yes. They're like, we refuse delivery. We will not deliver to you. They basically would not deliver us because we are atheists. They would not deliver us because we were protesting the Ark, and left us high and dry with 200 people total showed up, over 200 people. So we had over 100, 150 people there at all times. And we just wanted to pee. Like they were afraid we couldn't be associated. Like no one was advertising. It was utterly ridiculous, the discrimination that happened where we had to pee. Now people were quick on their feet. Jen and we had other organizers, because I was busy doing interviews the whole time, that were immediately We put shuttles together. We carpooled people. But a lot of those people that did that missed the protest because they were in the car shuttling, and we were infuriated. So what happened was FFRF sent a letter for us to 5-star demanding damages. They've ignored our request. I went to the national company, and verbally they were just dumbfounded. They couldn't understand. I'm like, well, because we're atheists. And they're like, why does that matter? And I'm like, because we live in Kentucky. And they were like, oh. They said they would never do business with that company again. They actually sent me a formal apology saying they refunded my money, saying they would take steps to ensure that that would never happen again. But we're still looking at potential litigation from the actual company who refused delivery.
So the image problem that atheists have is that we're the ones who are not lying, and we're the ones who advocate that you don't say things that are not true, and we're the ones that are saying you don't control what people believe. Okay, fine, let the kids hear both sides of the story, but if you're controlling their information and undermining science at the grassroots with these movies and stuff rather than through proper educational channels, and they never get the factual information because you've already got people telling them that all science is wrong and that they can't really show or prove what they've already shown and proved, this is wholly dishonest, but somehow we get the bad rap for that.
Yeah, and I think two things need to happen. One, as atheists, we need to come out of the closet because they need to realize that we're on the right side of this issue. Just like the LGBT movement, these are our friends, relatives. Once they realize they know an atheist and they've known them all their life, it changes their discrimination against atheists. So I think that's one. Also, we need to change the media story. I heard a reporter say something last night that was amazing. And someone goes, well, the press's job is to remain neutral. And a reporter said, no. As press, we should not remain neutral. Our obligation is to remain truthful. We should not sow two sides of an argument and present them as both fact. If we know one of them is fact, we can report that they're making this claim, but science tells us isn't true. Here are the facts. Their job is to be truthful and not give equal sides to bullshit and let people decide based on who the better speaker is and confuse America. And I think that's what our media shifted to, and it's a problem.
Yes, absolutely. And I've talked to a number of reporters in my life, and I've noticed that every time that I've managed to get on TV news for whatever reason, they've gotten the story wrong. Important details were just embellished or made up, right? And I've seen this every single time. So I have to think about, that there's never been a point where journalism was entirely accurate. And so you should be a bit skeptical about these things and not just swallow every story that's been repeated by word of mouth 10,000 times as though that's literally verbatim.
Yeah, I've been very pleased with the press overall. We kept our sound bites short and sweet because I knew they were looking for sound bites. So it was hard for them to screw up. They got some information wrong, but it was minor to the story. But overall, the press coverage on this particular story overall has been very good. We got our talking points in most press coverage, which I was very pleased with.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I noticed was
oh, sorry, dogs.
No, you got dogs barking. I've got a parrot that's singing in the other room.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear that going on. I should have
let me let them out. Sorry, I got to take a quick pause.
I wonder if I should go get that damn bird just to get it. You hear this? He's whistling now. Okay, well, waiting on Jim. I wonder if I should edit this part out. No, I can't. Okay, well, I'll just continue going. Have you bought? I wonder if I should maybe plug an advertisement or something.
All right, sorry about that. People coming in the door, dogs.
Yep, gotcha. So let's close this up unless you have a whole nother chapter that you want to open.
We'll save that for next time. The story has not ended. It's just the beginning. So we'll continue the conversation after we have more crazy stories to tell.
Yeah, and I'm going to be following you closely because you do good work, sir.
And you too. You keep it up.
All right. Thank you. And we're going to close it out.